Hello, my name is Tyler Mullen, and I will be your guest speaker for the day. So, um, to my knowledge about this class, you've already learned about how in the early 70s with the computers that were basically adding machines and just very primitive. I just, so I know what all of you are probably thinking when you hear about that. How did we go from, over the course of 45 years, go from that to basically having, in many ways, having all the technology we need and being able to store it in our pocket? Well, that isn't exactly a one-step process, but I can tell you where one of the biggest stepping stones then, and that goes all the way back to 1979, which was when Steve Jobs was visiting a research facility that was owned by Xerox, and he encountered this type of computer that he thought was so unusual because it used pictures and windows to display many of the features and its interface rather than the traditional lines of text and commands. And he thought that this was exactly what Apple needed to bring the computer into the mainstream and basically to have it be an appliance that every household could have, which is just brilliant in a lot of ways. And he knew a lot from the business aspect. He actually was not that involved in the technical aspects. The Apple One, Apple II, and the programming languages that were used at the base of those were actually developed by his business partner Steve Wozniak. He kind of stole a lot of the ideas from both the Xerox facility and from Wozniak. But he was able to make it into this thing that, but he knew what people would want if he would push a product. Um, and in that regard, he was brilliant. Now, the Macintosh itself was actually not finished until 5 years after that, because when they were sort of financing and determining how much it would cost, the technology was simply not available at the time, so it came out to $100,000 for each computer. Something had to change. And so they had to cut out a lot of the features that they originally planned to be in there, and some of them were ready to release later, but they weren't bundled with it, and they cut down the RAM to about 128K. I'm actually not sure how much it was originally, but that's what it came out to. And Wozniak just was not happy about this at all. Between that and being in a plane crash in 1981, that was what made him leave Apple. And so after a while, many people, it actually comes through to the Super Bowl. The Macintosh was really promoted through the Super Bowl ad that was supposed to be sort of like both a tribute and reference to 1984. We hope 1984 won't be like, we hope 1984 won't be like 1984 was the line that was read at the end of the commercial. And so they had this technology that came out that was previously, sort of the idea behind it was previously only available at research facilities and universities. So naturally, most people didn't really know how to use it. The very few people who did have computers at their homes were used the commands to the point where it was intuitive to them. So what did they do? They sent it out to a bunch of retailers so that way they could sort of rent it, test drive it. They allowed people to have a Mac for a little while. That was about 2 weeks to a month, I think it was, and a lot of people were really impressed by what they saw. And it actually did bring back a resurgence after some declining sales with the Apple III and the Apple Lisa, which were not good selling at all. But over time, but this actually backfired a lot, and mostly through most of the backlash came from the retailers actually, because most of by the time they got back most of them were in a state where they were not able to sell them. And the other factor that so retailers didn't want to carry a lot of their products after that, and afterwards, a lot of other companies such as the Commodore with the Amiga and the Microsoft with the early versions of Windows were sort of able to build upon the same idea, but add more features and make it easier to use. Macintosh did make attempts to come back, like with the Mac 2 or the Fat Mac, which was basically the original with 4 times as much memory. And but ultimately, it was a success. Long story short, it was a success at first, but it didn't work out too well in the long run. This naturally changed when they released the iMac 14 years after the original Mac was released, and it was very influential to a lot of the technology that came later. A lot of the computers of the 90s. But it was actually Steve Jobs was so disappointed by the ultimate commercial outcome of it that he resigned as CEO and handed over to John Scully, who was the CEO of Pepsi up until that point. So yeah, that was kind of the story of the original old Macintosh, which is of course one of the biggest influences on modern computers and sort of one of the biggest game changers that the industry has ever encountered. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I will now take any questions.